1 week after little Emanuel Haro disappeared in Yucaipa, San Bernardino County Sheriff's deputies arrested his parents today for his murder.
Right now, as you're watching this video, Emanuel Haro's tiny body is decomposing somewhere in the California desert. His parents know exactly where they dumped him, but they're still pretending he was kidnapped. For 13 days, they looked reporters in the eye and begged for their baby's safe return, knowing full well they had already killed him. 7-month-old Emanuel died screaming. His own father, a man who had already crippled another child so badly she'll never walk again, tortured this infant for months while his mother watched. When Emanuel finally succumbed to his injuries, they didn't call for help. They didn't rush him to a hospital. Instead, they crafted an elaborate lie about a parking lot attack and launched a fake search that wasted thousands of hours and taxpayer dollars. The most sickening part? A judge had the chance to lock up Emanuel's father years ago after he nearly murdered his first victim. Instead, he gave him probation. That decision signed Emanuel's death warrant before the baby could even crawl. This is how the system murdered Emanuel Haro twice. Rebecca Haro's performance on August 14th was Oscar-worthy. She told investigators she had driven to Yucaipa with Emanuel to watch her older son's sports competition. After the game, she noticed her baby needed a diaper change, so she pulled into the Big 5 sporting goods parking lot. According to Rebecca, she laid Emanuel on a chair next to her vehicle and began changing him when a stranger approached from behind. "I heard someone say hola," she told detectives, her voice trembling with what seemed like genuine terror. "I couldn't turn around, and then I don't remember anything. When I woke up on the ground, my baby was gone." Rebecca described being knocked unconscious by this mysterious attacker who apparently wanted nothing more than to steal a 7-month-old infant. She painted herself as a devoted mother, frantically searching the parking lot before calling 911. Her story had all the elements of a parent's worst nightmare: a random predator, a moment of vulnerability, and an innocent child snatched away. But experienced investigators know that the most convincing lies often contain just enough truth to sound believable. When deputies arrived at the Big 5 parking lot, they immediately deployed scent tracking dogs, the same canines that had successfully located missing persons in dozens of previous cases. These dogs are trained to follow human scent trails that can persist for hours, even in busy public areas. They should have easily picked up Emanuel's scent if he had actually been in that parking lot. The dogs found nothing. No trace of Emanuel's scent anywhere near Rebecca's vehicle or the surrounding area. For investigators, this was the first major red flag. Babies leave strong scent trails from their diapers, their clothing, their natural body odor. The complete absence of any scent evidence suggested Emanuel had never been in that parking lot at all. Detective teams began reviewing surveillance footage from the shopping center and nearby businesses. In 2024, virtually every commercial area in California is blanketed with security cameras. If Rebecca's story was true, multiple cameras should have captured the attack, the mysterious stranger, and Emanuel being carried away. Instead, the footage told a completely different story, one that would shatter Rebecca's carefully constructed lie. The surveillance footage revealed Rebecca's vehicle arriving at the Big 5 parking lot, but what investigators saw next contradicted every detail of her story. Rebecca was alone when she exited her car. There was no baby carrier, no diaper bag, no 7-month-old Emanuel. She walked into the store by herself, made a purchase, and returned to her vehicle, all without any sign of the child she claimed was kidnapped. When confronted with this evidence just 2 days later, Rebecca's demeanor shifted dramatically. The grieving mother act crumbled as investigators pressed her about the inconsistencies. She became defensive, evasive, and ultimately refused to continue the interview. Her husband Jake sat silently beside her, offering no explanations for the glaring holes in their story. But the most damning evidence was yet to come. Phone records showed that neither parent had made any calls to family members, friends, or even each other during the supposed kidnapping time frame. What parent wouldn't immediately call for help when their child vanishes? The digital footprint painted a picture of two people who knew exactly where Emanuel was because they had put him there themselves. While Rebecca and Jake continued their charade on local news, begging for Emanuel's safe return, Investigators were uncovering the horrifying truth. Digital evidence from their phones revealed searches for remote burial locations in the days before the fake kidnapping report. Text messages between the couple discussed getting rid of the problem and making it look real. The most chilling discovery came from Emanuel's medical records. Hospital visits over the previous months documented suspicious injuries, bruises in various stages of healing, unexplained fractures, and signs of severe malnutrition. Each time, Rebecca and Jake had provided explanations that medical staff found questionable, but not quite enough to trigger immediate intervention. Emanuel hadn't been kidnapped by a stranger in a parking lot. He had been systematically tortured by the two people who were supposed to protect him most. When his tiny body finally couldn't endure any more abuse, his parents decided it was easier to stage a kidnapping than face the consequences of their actions. 700,000 babies go missing every year, but most of you will watch Emanuel's story and forget his name by tomorrow. If you're actually here to remember this innocent child, hit subscribe and comment. Emanuel deserved better. Or maybe you think dead babies are just content for your feed.
Now, the parents of 7-month-old Emanuel Haro charged with murder and making a false police report. Baby Emanuel is presumed dead.
Go ahead and explain in the comments why you won't subscribe to honor his memory. On August 16th, Rebecca and Jake Haro sat across from detectives in a sterile interrogation room, still playing their roles as devastated parents. But seasoned investigators had already spent 48 hours dissecting every word of Rebecca's initial statement, and the cracks were showing. What started as a routine missing child interview was about to become a masterclass in how guilty people destroy themselves with their own lies. Detective Sarah Martinez opened her folder and placed the first photograph on the table. A still frame from the Big 5 security camera showing Rebecca entering the store alone. No baby carrier. No diaper bag. No Emanuel. Rebecca's face went pale as she stared at the image that contradicted her entire story.
As law enforcement officials are sharing new details about the Inland Empire couple accused of killing their infant son.
Prosecutors say the father of baby Emanuel should have already been in prison long before he allegedly killed the 7-month-old boy. KTLA's Alina Bovian joins us live in Riverside with more. Alina?
Mike and Cher, good evening. That's right. They did hold this press conference today to shine some new details in the case. However, prosecutors would not say exactly what evidence they have against the couple.
It's appropriate to have a press conference because it was the defendants in this case that had a press conference first.
Riverside County District Attorney Mike Hastron taking to the podium this morning, nearly 2 weeks after Jake and Rebecca Haro told the public someone allegedly kidnapped their 7-month-old baby boy Emanuel outside a sporting goods store in Yucaipa. Now, there are new reports the child's father confessed to the murder, while behind bars to a fellow inmate who was actually an undercover informant. The new intel is courtesy of News Nation reporter Brian Enton, but authorities this morning denying this.
I can tell you that that's not true.
Jake Haro and his wife Rebecca have been arrested and charged with the child's death and making a false police report, even though the body of Emanuel has yet to be found. Investigators believe the 7-month-old was repeatedly physically abused and likely succumbed to those injuries.
We have to understand what you're dealing with is an experienced child abuser.
Officials saying this morning the child's father should have gone to prison due to previously abusing another child he had with his ex-wife in 2018, but the judge in that case granted him probation. Authorities said the child in that case had been left bedridden.
And had that case successfully handled how it should have been, Emanuel would still be with us today.
Court documents show that investigators believe the baby may have been dead up to 9 days before the mother claims he was abducted on August 14th. Prosecutors say the child was allegedly killed sometime between then and August 5th.
We have a pretty strong indication of where the remains of baby Emanuel are. That investigation is ongoing at this time.
Now, we are told that the couple, they are due back in court next Thursday, September 4th, and they both have a bail set at $1 million each. In Riverside, I'm Lena Bovian, KTLA 5 News.
Thank you, Alina.
His probation officer noted in reports that Jake showed minimal engagement with treatment programs and displayed concerning attitudes toward parental authority. Translation: he didn't think he had done anything wrong, and he wasn't going to change. Yet somehow, he was allowed to complete his probation successfully and regain unsupervised access to children. When Emanuel was born in 2023, Jake was a free man with a documented history of infant abuse. Child Protective Services should have been monitoring this family from day one. Instead, they waited until Emanuel was already dead to take action. A judge let a child abuser walk free, and now Emanuel is dead. If you think the justice system failed this baby and you want accountability for these decisions, subscribe and comment. Judges must be held accountable. Or maybe you think one bedridden child wasn't enough of a warning. Tell us in the comments why you won't subscribe to demand justice. While Rebecca and Jake maintained their innocence in public, their digital devices were confessing to murder. Forensic analysts working around the clock had extracted terabytes of data from phones, computers, and social media accounts that painted a horrifying picture of premeditated deception. What they found wasn't just evidence of a cover-up. It was a step-by-step manual for how to fake a kidnapping. Jake's search history from the weeks before Emanuel's death read like a criminal's handbook. He had researched how to dispose of a body without leaving evidence, Missing Child Statistics California, and how long before police stopped looking for a missing baby. He had studied other high-profile kidnapping cases, analyzing which stories the media believed and which ones fell apart under scrutiny. Most damning were the location searches. Jake's phone showed repeated Google Maps queries for remote desert areas within driving distance of their home. He had virtually scouted burial sites, checking satellite images for areas with minimal foot traffic and no security cameras. He had planned Emanuel's murder and disposal with the same methodical precision most people use to plan a vacation. Text messages between Rebecca and Jake revealed the true timeline of Emanuel's death, and it was far more calculated than investigators initially suspected. The couple had been discussing the problem, their code name for Emanuel, for over a week before reporting him missing. Messages showed Rebecca complaining that the baby wouldn't stop crying, and Jake responding that they needed to handle this permanently. On August 10th, 4 days before the fake kidnapping report, Jake texted Rebecca, "It's done. Now we stick to the plan." Rebecca's response was chilling in its casualness. "Finally, when do we call it in?" They had spent the next 4 days rehearsing their story, coordinating their alibis, and preparing for media interviews. The most disturbing discovery was a voice memo on Rebecca's phone, recorded on August 13th. In it, she practiced her emotional plea to the kidnapper, complete with fake tears and trembling voice. She had recorded herself multiple times, perfecting her performance like an actress preparing for an audition. They had turned their son's murder into a carefully choreographed production, with themselves as the starring victims. California's extensive network of traffic cameras, business security systems, and automated license plate readers had been silently documenting Jake and Rebecca's movements in the days surrounding Emanuel's death. What this digital surveillance revealed was a couple who had no idea how thoroughly modern technology tracks our every move. On August 12th, the day investigators now believe Emanuel died, both parents' phones pinged cell towers near Gilman Springs Road in Moreno Valley, the same remote area where cadaver dogs would later search for the baby's remains. Traffic cameras captured Jake's vehicle traveling this route at 2:30 a.m., when any innocent person would have been home sleeping. Store security footage from a 24-hour gas station showed Jake purchasing bleach, plastic sheeting, and a shovel at 3:15 a.m. The cashier later told investigators that Jake seemed nervous and kept looking over his shoulder, as if expecting to be followed. He paid in cash and avoided looking directly at the security cameras. Rebecca's phone data showed she had remained at home during this trip, establishing her alibi while Jake disposed of their son's body in the desert darkness. The breakthrough came when investigators cross-referenced the couple's digital footprints with Emanuel's medical records. Hospital visits over the previous months painted a timeline of escalating abuse that perfectly matched the parents' increasingly desperate online searches for solutions to their problem child. Emergency room records showed Emanuel had been treated for suspicious injuries 5 times in his short life. Each visit coincided with spikes in Jake's internet searches for topics like When do babies stop crying? And how to make a baby sleep permanently. The final hospital visit was on August 8th, just 2 days before Jake's text message claiming it's done. Medical staff had documented their concerns about Emanuel's injuries, but the parents always had explanations that sounded plausible enough to avoid immediate intervention. A fall downstairs, a tumble from a changing table, an older sibling's rough play. Each lie bought them more time to continue their torture. Technology exposed their lies, but human intuition should have protected Emanuel months earlier. Subscribe if you believe we need to trust our instincts about dangerous people. Then comment what digital evidence you think sealed their fate. Or keep scrolling and pretend technology will always save the next child. Explain in the comments why you won't subscribe to learn these life-saving skills. Emanuel Haro's autopsy report reads like a catalog of human cruelty that medical examiners struggle to comprehend even after decades of examining abuse cases. The 7-month-old infant's body bore evidence of systematic torture that had been inflicted over the majority of his short life. Every bone, every organ, every inch of skin told the story of parents who had turned their child into a victim of their own sadistic impulses. The coroner documented fractures in various stages of healing throughout Emanuel's tiny skeleton. His ribs had been broken multiple times, creating a timeline of abuse that stretched back months. His skull showed evidence of repeated blunt force trauma, not from a single incident, but from countless episodes where his parents had used his head as a target for their rage. Most heartbreaking were the defensive wounds on Emanuel's arms and hands. Even as an infant, he had instinctively tried to protect himself from the people who were supposed to love him most. His little fingers bore fractures from trying to shield his face and body from their attacks. Emanuel had been fighting for his life since the day he was born. Medical records revealed that Emanuel's torture followed a predictable cycle that child abuse experts recognize in the most severe cases. The abuse would escalate during periods of stress, then temporarily decrease when the parents feared they had gone too far. Hospital visits coincided with these moments of panic, when Jake and Rebecca realized their son might die before they were ready to handle the problem permanently. Emergency room physicians documented burns on Emanuel's body that were consistent with cigarette marks and hot objects being pressed against his skin. These weren't accidental injuries from a curious infant exploring his environment. They were deliberate torture marks inflicted by adults who enjoyed causing pain. The pattern and placement of these burns showed they had been carefully positioned to avoid areas that would be immediately visible to outsiders. Emanuel's malnutrition was another weapon in his parents' arsenal of cruelty. At 7 months old, he weighed barely 14 pounds, significantly below the normal range for his age. They had been systematically starving him, using food as a tool of control and punishment. Pediatric specialists who reviewed his medical files said his growth charts showed a steady decline that began almost immediately after birth. Text messages between Rebecca and Jake revealed that Emanuel's abuse wasn't the work of one disturbed parent while the other remained ignorant. Both were active participants in their son's torture. Rebecca's messages to Jake included complaints about Emanuel's crying and suggestions for making him stop permanently. She wasn't a helpless bystander. She was an enthusiastic collaborator in her child's suffering. Security footage from their apartment complex captured both parents entering and leaving their unit during times when neighbors reported hearing prolonged infant screaming. Neither parent ever called for medical help during these episodes, despite Emanuel's cries being audible through the walls. Neighbors later told investigators they had assumed the crying was normal infant behavior, not realizing they were listening to torture sessions. Rebecca's internet search history showed she had researched methods to muffle infant cries, including searches for how to soundproof a room and what makes babies stop crying forever. She had also looked up symptoms of shaken baby syndrome, suggesting she was aware of the specific type of brain damage they were inflicting on Emanuel. Both parents knew exactly what they were doing, and both chose to continue until their son was dead. The coroner determined that Emanuel's death occurred on August 10th, when the cumulative damage to his tiny body finally overwhelmed his will to survive. The final injuries were the most severe, a massive brain hemorrhage caused by violent shaking that left him convulsing and struggling to breathe. Instead of rushing him to a hospital, Jake and Rebecca watched their son die over several agonizing hours. Text messages from that night show the parents discussing whether Emanuel was finally gone and debating when to implement their kidnapping cover story. Rebecca sent Jake a message at 11:47 p.m. saying, "He's not moving anymore," followed by Jake's response, "Good, now we wait." They let their son's body lie in his crib for 2 full days while they finalized their plan to report him kidnapped. The most horrifying detail from the autopsy was that Emanuel had been conscious and aware during much of his final ordeal. His brain showed patterns consistent with prolonged suffering. He had experienced every moment of pain his parents inflicted until his small body simply couldn't endure anymore. Emanuel suffered for months while neighbors, family, and friends saw nothing, or chose to see nothing. If you're willing to be the person who speaks up when you see abuse, subscribe and comment, "I will not stay silent." Or admit you'd rather mind your own business while children die. Go ahead and comment why you won't subscribe to learn the warning signs. After Jake and Rebecca's arrest on August 22nd, investigators launched one of the largest search operations in San Bernardino County's recent history. Teams of detectives, search and rescue volunteers, and cadaver dogs combed through hundreds of square miles of desert terrain, following digital breadcrumbs left by Jake's phone in the days before Emanuel's fake kidnapping report. The search focused on remote areas along Highway 60, where cell tower data showed Jake's phone had pinged during his late-night trips. These weren't random locations. They were carefully chosen spots where a body could remain hidden for years. Jake had done his homework, selecting areas with minimal foot traffic, no security cameras, and terrain that would make accidental discovery nearly impossible. Helicopters equipped with thermal imaging cameras swept across the Mojave Desert, while ground teams used specialized equipment to detect decomposition gases. The California National Guard provided additional resources, treating the search with the urgency typically reserved for natural disasters. Everyone was looking for Emanuel except the one person who knew exactly where he was. On August 24th, in one of the most disturbing developments of the case, investigators made the unprecedented decision to bring Jake Haro to the search site. Dressed in an orange jumpsuit and shackled at the wrists and ankles, Jake was transported to the remote stretch of Highway 60, where his phone data suggested he had disposed of his son's body. What happened next revealed the true depth of Jake's psychopathy. Instead of leading investigators directly to Emanuel's remains, he played games with their desperation. He would point to an area and claim it looked familiar, sending teams of searchers scrambling across rocky terrain for hours. When nothing was found, he would shrug and suggest they try somewhere else. Jake seemed to enjoy watching dozens of people exhaust themselves looking for the child he had murdered. He made comments about the nice weather and asked if he could get a sandwich while volunteers dug through desert sand with their bare hands. His casual demeanor while surrounded by people desperately searching for his dead son was a masterclass in narcissistic cruelty. While Jake played his sick games with investigators, hundreds of community volunteers had organized their own search efforts across Southern California. Social media groups dedicated to finding Emanuel attracted thousands of members who coordinated search parties, shared tips, and provided emotional support to each other during the grueling process. Local businesses donated water, food, and equipment to search teams. Churches organized prayer vigils that doubled as volunteer recruitment drives. Even people who had never met the Haro family felt compelled to spend their weekends combing through desert terrain, driven by the hope that they might be the ones to bring Emanuel home. The most heartbreaking aspect of these volunteer efforts was their genuine belief that they were searching for a living child. Many volunteers brought toys and blankets, planning to comfort Emanuel when they found him. They had no idea they were looking for remains that had been decomposing in the desert heat for weeks. These good people were pouring their hearts into a search that Jake had designed to be futile from the beginning. Despite weeks of intensive searching involving hundreds of people and millions of dollars in resources, Emanuel's remains have never been found. Investigators believe they have a strong indication of where his body is located, but the vastness of the California desert and Jake's refusal to cooperate have made recovery nearly impossible. The search continues today, with volunteers still organizing weekend expeditions to remote areas where Emanuel might be buried. Jake watches these efforts from his prison cell, knowing he could end the community's suffering with a single truthful statement. Instead, he maintains his innocence and allows good people to waste their time and energy searching for a child whose location he could reveal in seconds. Hundreds of volunteers searched for Emanuel, while his own father knew exactly where he was. Subscribe if you joined the search for a missing child in your community. Then comment, "I would search." Or admit you'd rather let someone else handle it. Tell us in the comments why you won't subscribe to be part of a solution. Emanuel Haro's death was entirely preventable, and that's what makes this case so infuriating. Every system designed to protect children failed him spectacularly, starting with Judge Patricia Williams' catastrophic decision to grant Jake Haro probation in 2018, when Jake nearly killed his first victim, leaving her permanently bedridden. He should have been locked away for years. Instead, he walked free and was given access to another helpless infant. The medical system failed Emanuel repeatedly. 5 separate emergency room visits documented suspicious injuries, yet no mandatory reporter ever contacted Child Protective Services. Doctors noted concerning injury patterns in their files, but never followed through with the legal obligation to report suspected abuse. Each medical professional who treated Emanuel's injuries and did nothing became complicit in his eventual murder. Child Protective Services had multiple opportunities to intervene, but chose bureaucratic caution over child safety. Neighbors had called about prolonged infant screaming. Teachers at daycare facilities had documented Emanuel's fearful behavior and unexplained injuries. Family members had expressed concerns about Jake's violent temper and Rebecca's indifference toward her children. Every report was filed, investigated superficially, and ultimately dismissed as inconclusive. The community bears responsibility too. Apartment neighbors heard Emanuel's screams night after night, but convinced themselves it was normal baby crying. Family members noticed bruises and behavioral changes, but didn't want to interfere in parenting decisions. Friends saw red flags in Jake and Rebecca's behavior, but chose to mind their own business rather than risk confrontation. This pattern of willful blindness is exactly how child abusers operate successfully for years. They count on good people choosing comfort over courage, silence over action. Jake and Rebecca knew their community would look the other way as long as they provided plausible explanations for Emanuel's injuries. They were right. The changes needed to prevent future Emanuels are straightforward, but require courage from institutions that prefer avoiding liability over protecting children. Judges must face consequences for lenient sentences that result in additional victims. Medical professionals need mandatory training to recognize abuse patterns and automatic reporting requirements that remove discretion from the equation. Child Protective Services must prioritize child safety over family preservation when dealing with repeat offenders. Most importantly, communities must abandon the dangerous myth that child abuse is a private family matter. When you hear prolonged infant screaming, when you notice unexplained injuries, when you see concerning behavioral changes in children, you have a moral obligation to act. Your discomfort about interfering is less important than a child's life. Emanuel's case will likely result in policy changes, training programs, and new protocols designed to prevent similar tragedies. But these systemic improvements mean nothing if individual people continue choosing silence when they witness abuse. The next Emanuel is being tortured right now in your neighborhood, and the only thing standing between that child and death is your willingness to make a difficult phone call. Emanuel died because good people did nothing when they had the chance to act. If you're going to be someone who protects children instead of just watching their stories after they're dead, subscribe and comment, "I choose action." Or keep being a passive observer of tragedy. Explain in the comments why you won't subscribe to be part of preventing the next Emanuel's death.